Today we have with us one of the most prominent writers in the Spanish-speaking world. He's from Colombia, and his last novel, which has been awarded with the prestigious Alfaguara Prize, has been recently translated to English by Bloomsbury editors. He's no other than Juan Gabriel Vásquez. Very welcome to the Instituto Cervantes de Dublín.
Thank you. It's a pleasure always to be here.
The Sound of the Things Falling, your last novel, tell us about it.
Well, the novel is the story of this young law professor called Antonio Yammara, who one day meets this mysterious character, a guy called Ricardo Laverde, who obviously has something to hide, who is obviously not who he says he is. And what begins as this frivolous curiosity turns into something more serious when this Ricardo Laverde gets killed by a shooter in the street, by a hitman, and my narrator gets a bullet, a stray bullet hits him and obviously changes his life. And he becomes obsessed with the idea that finding out who this guy was and why he was killed will let him reach some truth about what has happened to himself, the way his life has changed. So he embarks on this personal investigation. It's just a personal inquiry in the life of a dead man and in the past of Colombia. And that sends him back to the years in which the drug trade effectively began in Colombia, the early 70s. We learned that this guy was a pilot and that he was not only a witness but also a participant in the first moments of the drug trade. And so the novel becomes in that way a sort of exploration of what it has meant for my generation to grow up at the same time as the drug trade, and particularly what it meant for us to suffer the worst years of the drug-related violence, of the drug wars in the 80s, when Pablo Escobar basically declared this war against the Colombian government. This is what I have tried to explore.
And it's not a real case. The story is not based on actual facts, but somehow portrays a real the reality of an age in Colombia.
It is a work of the imagination that tries to explore things that really happened. But one of my obsessions, obviously, has been, not only in this novel but in the other novels too, how public events shape our private lives. This is one of the things that interests me as a novelist. How those things that happen in what we call history or politics, how they penetrate our lives and affect the way we behave as friends or as couples or as parents and children. So this is what the novel tries to do. One of the reasons behind the writing of the novel was my realization that about those years, about that period of violence, we have a lot of public information. We have a lot of statistics, a lot of images in the media. We can even go and find the video of a presidential candidate in Colombia getting killed, getting shot. But at some moment I became anxious at the idea that there wasn't a place we could go to find about the private, the intimate effect all that had. So in a way, the novelist I wanted to be is a sort of historian of emotions. He tries to find out what is the emotional, moral side of those very public events.
And you were living in France for a while, and as far as I know, you are based now in Spain, in Barcelona. That distance has any effect in the way you see Colombia, and the way because you write a lot about Colombia.
Yeah.
So that period of your life living abroad has any effect in your writing?
Oh yes, it's very difficult to prove that, obviously, but I've always said that if I was able to write about Colombia, it was because I had left Colombia. Um, my first book is a book of stories about Belgium and France, and people used to ask me, "Why don't you write about Colombia? Why do you write about people in the Ardennes?" You know, and the reason, to sum it up in a nutshell, is that I felt that since I didn't really understand my country, then I wasn't allowed to write about my country. And I think it was because of the distance, because of the time I had spent abroad, and because there was an ocean between my country and me. I think it was because of that I ended up realizing that perhaps the fact that I didn't understand my country was the best reason to write about it. That I could use novels as a way of understanding, as a way of asking questions, rather, to get a little bit closer to a certain understanding of the history of my country and how that has shaped me as an individual. And I'm pretty sure that happened because I was away.
And Barcelona, the place you are living, is historically a place where many of the most important Latin American authors have been living. And now we are celebrating the 50 years anniversary of the Latin American literary boom. What is remaining about this literary boom? Is it still expanding, or there is a turning point with the new generation as you are taking different ways?
Well, I've always considered the Latin American boom as the real founders of my tradition. The tradition I try to write in began with them. What I mean is that before them, the Latin American novel had maybe produced a couple of isolated things, very interesting things, but isolated. There wasn't a tradition of Latin American novels to speak of. That began with them, with these guys, Vargas Llosa, Garcia Marquez, Carlos Fuentes, Julio Cortázar. So in a way, they're quite present for me in the sense that they are living. Vargas Llosa and Garcia Marquez are still living. Vargas Llosa is still writing, but at the same time, there are classics. They are living classics, and for me, as I have said before, having them sharing the same world with them, it's almost as if a 21st century Irish writer could pick up the phone and call James Joyce, because these guys are the founders of my tradition. So it's a very strange situation and a very profitable one. I don't feel in any way threatened by their presence, as many writers do.
And you are very young, but you are already on the top of the mountain of the literary world. So what is your side? How is your side looking down?
I'm rather looking up to the next book and seeing how difficult it will be to write it. Because one of the cruel things of this trade, I think, is that every book is more difficult than the last one, in the sense that you know more things, you're more conscious of the pitfalls and the problems and the difficulties of writing. You don't want to repeat yourself. I'm one of those writers who want to change with every book.
And just to finish, any advice for one of these young writer who is already on the bottom of the hill, just getting his boots ready and his backpack to start climbing the mountain?
Well, I always give the same piece of advice, which is it's very simple but very honest, and I think it is very useful. And that is, write only if you feel it is absolutely necessary. Write only if you know that your reward will be the satisfaction of a job well done.
Thank you very much. With this motivating ending, we finish our interview.